We're here at the University of Iceland, where we're going to have a little talk with Dr. Þorvaldur Þórðarson, the volcanologist, about the recent events in Grindavík and what the future may hold for the town of Grindavík. A two-pronged question that we have for you now, which is what happened this last weekend, this eruption that started on the 8 o'clock in the morning of the 14th, was it? And was over pretty much by Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And then, after we've talked about that, then maybe we could discuss briefly what the future holds in terms of the activity in the area.
Well, basically what we had is the magma that was accumulating into the shallow magma chamber at 4 to 5 kilometers depth under Svartsengi, that clearly had reached sort of similar levels as it had been before the December 18th eruption and also before the events on the 10th of November.
Yeah.
So people were kind of expecting something to happen, and the way things unfolded, we clearly could see that the magma had, as I say, started moving because the earthquake swarms moved up, and it also seemed to have triggered movement on the plate boundary, and we had extra extension, which, especially on the southern part of the system, sort of just above or north of Grindavík and in Grindavík, and then the magma had ready access for, further south than it had before, and where it surfaced was actually southeast of Hagafell, and there was about a kilometer-long fissure that was erupting there through the night and in the early morning.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of not as intense as the previous eruption. There was the intensity was significantly lower, probably about 120 cubic meters per second, compared to 350 in the 18th of December eruption during the first hours.
Yeah, that one was a lot bigger and a lot sort of more...
it was more intense.
Yeah, more intense.
And it is bigger because, at the end, this eruption that took place on the 14th of January ended sooner than the 18th of December eruption, and it's probably only about half of, or even less than half of what was erupted on the 18th of December, which is about 5 to 6 million cubic meters.
Yeah.
So, but the fissure was shorter, so it's kind of a scaled down event in many ways, which was good. And then the unexpected happened is that the original fissure, which is almost 700 to 800, maybe up to a kilometer away from the margins of the outskirts of town, but sort of around noon, we had this second fissure open up just outside of town. I mean, less than 100 meters from the northernmost houses in the sort of northeastern part of Grindavík. And the view by some at that time were thinking that, okay, the dike is propagating and now it's propagating further southwards and in under Grindavík, and there's a lot of magma under Grindavík, and that was sort of the story that was told at the time. But if you look at the petrology of the products, it is clear that what came up in the vicinity of Grindavík is something that is derived from what is erupting at the uppermost fissure or the northernmost fissure. So the magma that came up close to Grindavík is probably not a big dike. It's much more like a little dike that sort of found a path through the fractures that were opening at a very, very shallow level, because this magma is also degassed, so it didn't have lots of gas in them.
So it's just a small extension of the
Yes, it's
original
sort of
fissure.
offshoot of,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's an offshoot towards the south-southwest, which is in the direction of Grindavík,
Yeah.
but it's offshoot of the original dike. That's what the, if you look at the petrology and geochemistry, what that is suggesting, and that kind of fits with the fact that there is no extra heat coming up through the fractures that open up within the town as a consequence of this particular undress that took place on the 14th. You don't see any additional heat flow. You don't see any additional gas come out. If there's magma at shallow levels under the town, then you would expect that magma to be degassing and emanating sort of SO2 and other gases in reasonably large quantities, up through these cracks and fissures. And also, magma is significantly hotter than its surrounding, so you would, expect to see some kind of heat flow up from the fissures, and we did not see any of those. And even, sort of what kind of confirms this in my mind is that we know that the ocean or the sea is actually flowing into the cracks that have opened, and we see actually the tides in the fracture. So if there was magma at a shallow level in those fractures, then that would probably have, the ocean would have encountered that magma, and magma is much hotter.
So we would have had
quite a bit of steam, and we didn't see that either.
No steam. That is true. So the November 10th event resulted in a rift valley or a graben on the...
Two grabens.
Two grabens.
Yes, because the grabens that form, there's a western one which is about 3 kilometers wide, and there's an eastern one which is about 1 kilometer wide.
Oh, that's the one that goes through town.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And the western one is the western margins of that is by the golf course.
Yes.
This is quite a bit outside of town, and extends into the western half of town. And then you have an area which has been uplifted, which we call a horst.
Horst.
Yes, and that's 300 meters wide or something like that. It's just a stretch of land which is trending the same direction as the falls, and it's been uplifted. So it actually forms the eastern boundary of the western graben, and the western boundary of the eastern graben.
Okay. So, but then during the December 18th, there was no intrusion like that there, right? No, in Grindavík, like there was no.
I don't think there was an intrusion of magma either on the 10th. I think it's all tectonic.
It's tectonic, okay. So it's tectonic,
and
that's
I
why
think, yes, and the magma plays a role in this, but especially when you get to Svartsengi in that area. But when the movements start, you have these sort of extensional tectonics. They get kicked off, and then you open up pathways for the magma to move into.
Okay.
But there's never that much magma involved that it doesn't fill the cracks. It just fills parts of them.
Okay. But this eruption came with another graben or rift valley forming on the...
Nope.
No, that's... So, what's
that rift valley, that graben was there.
Oh, it was there. Okay.
Yes, and it had moved on the 10th. Both of these grabens were actually... Both of these grabens existed before anything had happened in Grindavík. So you had these two grabens go through Grindavík, and you had this horse, so there's a high ground which actually goes through the middle of town.
Yes, okay.
And they were there, but people had filled a lot of that in.
Yeah.
When they're building houses and they're putting some support underneath and they're building roads. And so it's basically all these topography that existed there was actually filled in. Now, when we had this unrest, on the 10th, that sort of remobilized all these cracks and faults, and of course formed more fractures in. But it, sort of triggered movements on these pre-existing fault scarps. And on the 10th, there was more movement on the western graben. So that subsided then about over where the greatest substance happened was over 1.6 meters.
Wow.
The eastern one only, at that time, if I remember the numbers correctly, had only dropped by 60 or 70 centimeters. So there was less movement on that. And then there's a movement on that again on the 14th of January and possibly on the 18th of December. We just don't know.
No, okay.
And it's kind of, and that eastern graben goes and trends right through the harbor.
Yeah.
And is the reason why the harbor, the harbor is there, is why the conditions are good for a harbor, is the existence of this graben, which, or these grabens that go through town. So, what takes also gives.
Yeah, because the town is there because of the harbor.
Yes.
That's the only reason.
That's the only reason why, and there's not many that harbors along the stretch of coast, so,
No, I mean that's true. I think both back in history, I think both the bishoprics of Skálholt would use this harbor, and the Hansalik would trade there in the Middle Ages and early modern era.
And the bishops in South Iceland, they used Eyrarbakki more than anything else.
Yeah, they did.
Which does not have a very good harbor at all.
No.
But because the rivers, the big glacier rivers, were just such a huge boundary in those days.
There is hardly a usable harbor from Þorlákshöfn all the way east to, I don't know, you can say...
Höfn has a...
Höfn is a harbor.
But yes, it is. But it's a challenging one to use, actually, and get in and out. And of course, the Landeir Höfn is
an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, it is, and something we created. Just the nature had nothing to do with the construction of that one, and didn't even contribute to it.
It's actually doing the reverse of contributing to it.
So basically, from the East Fjords to Þorlákshöfn, there is not many places where you could.
No, where you can land or harbor a ship.
You can harbor a ship from just because nature actually provides you with the conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, people thought also complete design of a harbor at Dyrhólaey, the southernmost point of Iceland, and they had drawn it all up. They were going to make a harbor there. There was a proposal that was looked at quite seriously in the sort of right around 1970.
That would have been bad for that natural gem.
Yes,
that would have destroyed it, and maybe parts of Reynisfjara at the same time, which are now very popular. So this particular eruption is, as we said, it's over. But this is not over. This whole thing is far from over.
No, and as I understand it, there's still some movement on some of the faults and fractures in town, because it takes time for things to settle down. Svartsengi and the stations around Svartsengi, they're starting to rise again. So we have renewed inflation in that area, most likely because magma is flowing into that shallow storage zone between 4 and 5 kilometers, and if that turns out to be right, then that's we're most likely going to have a repeat of the events that we've been seeing unfolding since November, and we get more eruptions. And as long as magma is flowing from the deeper storage zone into the shallower storage zone, this unrest is very likely to continue. So we can't say when it's going to be over. We don't know. It could be over tomorrow, but it could also be over 10 years from now. And that's the hard part of the equation, is that huge uncertainty, and that and that's what makes all decisions quite difficult.
So there's no end in sight, and it's hard to make any decisions with that in mind. This sort of system that the magma chamber under Svartsengi is fueling, the Sundhnúkagígar.
At least partly fueling it.
Yeah, partly at least. Would that be the same magma chamber that would fuel the system or the fractures that are west of Svartsengi, like Eldvörp? And
yes, most likely.
Most likely.
We don't know how events along there will unfold. But I would think, if something makes it difficult for the magma to come up along the Sundhnúkar lineament, or the Sundhnúkar weakness, if you like, where you have already fractured things, and so things are open and more permeable, so magma has an easier access to getting up to the surface. But if something there, even the magma itself, if it cools down enough, then it can actually become in a viscous state. And when it is in a viscous state, it's actually really, really strong. It's actually much stronger than when it is in a solid state. So that when magma is in the temperature interval between sort of 1,000 and 800 degrees, it is ductile.
Okay.
And it behaves like a ductile material, but it has a lot of strength because it's a coherent mass. Yeah. And when it cools below 800 degrees, then it's actually in the brittle domain, or it's frozen. But as it freezes, it forms cooling joints, because when you go from the liquid to the solid state, you reduce the volume, and so you form these cooling joints just as a consequence of the magma shrinking as it goes into solid state. But that also makes it much weaker, because you get lots of fractures going through the solid part. So the solid part in lavas is actually quite weak. It's that viscous part that is really, really strong. And if the dike, which is down there, if it cools down and stays in that viscous state, and the new magma is going to try to come up, it might have a hard time breaking through that. And that might then force it to find a new path. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, then it may actually say, well, it's easier to go on the west side than the east side. Let's just go up and produce an eruption in Eldvörp.
If it would move over to Eldvörp, that would be a more feasible location for an eruption than where it
would be better for Grindavík, and better for the infrastructure that are at Svartsengi, the power plant and the Blue Lagoon, and because there's it's further away. Mm-hmm. The further away this activity is, the better for those structures, and so if you want to hope, then you hope for it to move somewhere else.
Exactly. I guess so. The future of Grindavík, in sort of volcanological or geological terms, like, it's very hard to predict what happens, and it's quite uncertain for quite some time.
Yeah, and I think the biggest uncertainty is associated with the fact that we don't know how many events we're going to have similar to what we've already had. We could have one more, we could have 10 more. Yeah. And we don't know what time frame that can extend over. I mean, are we talking about a few months, a couple of years, or 10 years, or even longer? And the unfortunate thing is that we just don't know, and we don't see any clear indication that what is happening is actually changing rhythm, sort of indicating that it might be on the decline or something like that. So while the situation is like that, we're probably going to have repeat of those events that we've been witnessing since November. And
people have commonly referred to the Krafla eruptions, and we've talked about that.
It's similar in the sense you have this rhythmic activity, and for the same reason. Yeah,
but that took almost 10 years.
Yes,
and with
it was 9 eruptions over 9 years. Yeah, or was it 10 eruptions over 9 years, something like that? Yeah, so that's sort of that's the time frame that this could last. This is what makes the situation so difficult for anyone involved, and of course more difficult for people of Grindavík than anyone else.
Yes, indeed, and because who likes to have massive uncertainty about their homes? That's not exactly anybody's.
No, and it's probably not sensible to actually go and stay in Grindavík or live in Grindavík while this unrest is ongoing. And then you got to start thinking about, okay, what's the time frame? I mean, we can't let people sit and wait for many, many years either.
No.
So something has to be done.
Yes.
And the people of Grindavík are going to have some kind of resolution out of it. What that is exactly, that I've always said that's between the people of Grindavík and the authorities. I mean, we probably all have views on what should be done, etc. But at the end of the day, they are the people that are going to, deal with the consequences of this whole thing, and therefore I think they should have a strong say in it.
Absolutely. Well, we kind of sort of got around to it, but we frequently get asked, living in Iceland, like, why do you build towns next to volcanoes or on top of volcanoes? Or
I think this, there is probably, sort of in general terms, we're thinking about this from the concept of acceptable risk.
Mm-hmm.
And acceptable risk, we of course, is different from one place to another, but one of the kind of acceptable risks that we have all in common is we drive cars.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in traffic. You accept the risk that is associated with getting into a car and using it to get from A to B, because you think that is more beneficial than not doing it, despite the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also true that, like here in Iceland and many other places elsewhere where we have communities living either very close to volcanoes or on volcanoes or even within calderas. That happened because these geological features and phenomena, they actually created situation that helped us with a number of things like harbor,
mm-hmm.
and crossing rivers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's how it sort of developed to begin with. And then we realized later on, it's like, we built actually a bridge right across the fault. and
with all the problems that come to that.
Yes. So that's it. I mean, if you think Naples is in a caldera,
yes,
Campi Flegrei, and that's it's in the caldera and next to Vesuvius.
Yes.
So it's a double whammy.
Yeah, it's a double whammy, and I mean the Netherlands are more or less underwater technically.
Yes, and that's an acceptable risk.
That's an acceptable risk,
but the whole thing is it also has to do with social memory.
Yeah. And
frequency of events.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, events that happen sort of roughly at 100-year cycles around that. Societies totally forget those events between.
Mm-hmm. That's a part of it. I mean, it hasn't erupted in Reykjanes for 700 years.
Yes. And we were saying, it can start erupting again, and it's very likely that we're going to have eruptions. Probably more than half of the population are like, rubbish. No.
Yeah, and also on the other hand, like, what are you going to do about it? I mean, if you live there, I mean, you just.
Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to point out at the moment is, it's not going away. It's going to be here. It's going to be part of this environment. And it will have impact, but we can also undertake certain activities that will help us minimize the impact of this event. Now, we probably cannot take all the effects away, but we can reduce, significantly some of them. And a very good example took place in the last eruption. That diverting wall that had been put up north of Grindavík. It really, really worked because it diverted the flow 80% of the lava that came up in that eruption westwards, and it kept that lava away from the town. But My only criticism regarding what was taking place, in Grindavík and around Svartengi in terms of mitigation and doing building protective things, is that we were doing it after the events happened. It's part of the response. It's not preventive.
No, it's reactive.
It's reactive. And I'm not saying we need to start building protective walls all over the place or digging ditches or whatever. That's not. But we can prepare and we can plan.
Yes.
And we can make sure that we have all the materials that we need for doing this close by. And if we do that, then we also plan where we're going to put it and all that stuff. Then we can actually, when we need it, we can go and just put it up and we'll be quick.
Yes. I mean, because as has been discussed in the media, there are obviously other places, both population centers and just infrastructure that might be at risk in subsequent eruptions in this area, simply like Hafnarfjörður, or the plant up in Hellisheiði. Or Hveragerði.
Hellisheiði power plant.
Yeah.
Nesjavellir power plant. Yes, Hveragerði might be threatened to a degree.
So along with having materials ready for berms in vital places, I guess for the future we should probably also think about where we plan to build next.
I think we should, when we are planning neighborhoods and where we build, I think we need to think about what kind of natural hazards could we have in the future in that particular area. And it doesn't mean that we have to close areas off or anything like that. We just use it for different things. So, if there's an area which is exposed or vulnerable, for lava flow, don't have residents there. Have some other activity, either industry or even recreational area. I mean, the city of Portland has done. That's how they have organized and designed their town. The floodplain around the river, that's only for recreation, because you can have an eruption from the volcanoes above, up in the Sierras, and they can produce lahars. They can come down, really fast and flood areas. So they don't want people to live in areas that can potentially, in the future, be flooded because of a lahar that was produced by an eruption that is more than 100 kilometers away.
That's something to think about.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what, and I think that's the main purpose of sort of hazard mitigation, and it is actually to help with these things and reduce the risk that we take, and basically reduce what we think is acceptable risk.
Indeed. Well, it was very nice to talk to you again.
My pleasure.
I'm very thankful for you taking your time for this. We will doubtless see you again.
That's possible.
It's possible. And yeah, have a good weekend.
Same to you, and thank you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine.